The Spin-off Podcast Network.
You've maxed out your 401k, you're contributing to an IRA, and making some other investments. You're ahead of the game and doing well. But where do you go from here? The same old story can only get you so far. If you want a new take from a new type of financial professional, we invite you to get a fresh perspective beside an agent with the backing of New York Life. Insurance, investments, retirement, and more. Visit nyl.com to learn more. Investments are offered through registered representatives of NyLife Securities, LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a New York Life company.
You know what's smart? Enjoying a fresh gourmet meal at home that you didn't have to cook. Meet Factor, your loophole in the laws of mealtime. Chef-crafted meals delivered with a tap, ready in just 2 minutes. You know what's even smarter? Treating yourself without cheating your goals. Factor is dietitian approved, chef prepared, and you plated. Pretty smart, huh? Refresh your routine and eat smart with Factor. Learn more at factormeals.com.
Nau mai hoki mai ki ata fold e mihi nei ko Duncan Greive tōku ingoa. This is a break glass in case of emergency fold because yesterday honestly, I'm going to say it and it's going to sound like maybe it's not an emergency, but hang with me and hopefully I will be able to explain why I think it is actually quite a profound thing that happened yesterday. So, MCH, the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, released a discussion document under the name Media Reform, Modernising Regulation and Content Funding Arrangements for New Zealand. And it's a fairly anodyne title, but I think it actually represents something more interesting and certainly more joined up than anything we've had in the media space in New Zealand for quite some time. There's a couple of caveats I need to make about that at the top. It's a discussion document. That means that none of this stuff is guaranteed to pass into law. It's essentially, this is what the government is, and the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, which oversees agencies like New Zealand On Air and the Film Commission and Creative New Zealand, this is what they're vibing, but it's meant to prompt feedback. It will evolve. Not all of it will happen. It's high level. It's just proposals. These are quotes from the intro. Government has not decided whether to progress them. The overarching aims are, there's two essentially. One is to create a modern and fit-for-purpose regulatory and funding environment, and the second, to support a healthy and sustainable media and content production sector that delivers authentic local content for New Zealand audiences. Those are good aims. And there are also things, I don't think you could answer either of them and say that that's how things are functioning at the moment. It's not, our laws aren't modern, they're certainly not fit for purpose, they don't apply the same kind of regime and treatment to domestic players as international ones. It's just a total mess, and it's long past time that we did something like this. But as much as it's a proposal, the big caveat, Paul Goldsmith has written the intro to this, and I think that's quite important. Ministries can create documents that, especially for a relatively new government, that they haven't necessarily kind of signed off on. The fact that he's written the intro suggests a level of engagement and, if not quite full-throated endorsement, that that this is certainly broadly consonant with how he has, after 9 months in the role, come to view this sector. And for that, I really want to give him credit, because we've had so many media ministers over the last little while, and most of them have left the job not on their own terms, and most of them have left the sector not in a better place. Not that it's easy, and like I said, none of this might happen, but the fact that after 9 months, Paul Goldsmith has written the intro to something as sort of joined up as this is I think quite important, because the media sector's been crying out for reform for some years, not always coherently, not always speaking in one voice, in fact very rarely doing so, but it's telling to me there's a date in here which sort of leaps out and kind of stings for me, which is 2018, which is when Ireland undertook a similar round of reforms. Ireland's a very similar country to us, sort of colonised, English speaking, has a lot of, it's about the same size of us, about a similar size economy. This stuff should be similarly hard, but they managed to get it done, and they did it 7 years ago. And I think that sort of says how far behind we are. But yeah, so in the intro he writes, legislation is outdated and is stifling innovation. I don't really know if it's stifling innovation, but it's creating a kind of profound structural advantage for tech companies operating in this country beyond all the myriad advantages they already have in terms of scale and spreading costs across 200 territories, that kind of thing. But he says, and this is a quote from Goldsmith, he wants to ensure regulatory settings treat all players equally. How do you define players? That's quite a crucial thing. Is social media in or out? We'll get to that. But it's an important thing for a Minister of Media to say. The big thing I love, beyond the fact that it exists at all, is it treats production and distribution as part of the same bundle. That has not typically been the case. If you look at reforms historically, at legislation historically, it's been very piecemeal patchwork. It's been, we'll do something for the gaming industry here, we'll do something for the international-facing screen production sector here, we'll pump something into journalism here. It hasn't treated this as a joined-up ecosystem, which it is. There's another moment that sticks in my head when Claire Curran, this is now quite a few different ministers ago, she addressed a New Zealand On Air function around Christmas. It would have been probably 2017. And she addressed the crowd, and I'm not quoting directly here, but the sentiment was, you should love me because I'm going to get you guys more money. And there was a huge response of the crowd because typically the response of New Zealand media has wanted more money. And, on a per capita basis, we don't spend a lot of money on public media. It's fair for us to want that. But the fact is that a lot of the Labour government's initiatives, instead of starting from regulation and legislation, they started from money. And and it's clear this document says there's no more money. So that's just off the table entirely. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because I don't know that money is the main problem here. The main problem is that that Netflix plays by a wholly different set of rules to TVNZ, that Google and Facebook play by a wholly separate set of rules to stuff in the Herald, despite doing many of the same things. So, again, I think that as a starting place, whoever drafted this, whoever briefed it, this is a really smart piece of work. So let's go into it. It starts off from kind of a position of crisis. It has some data points. It talks about and leans on New Zealand On Air's Where Are the Audiences for insights. It says sector reports from early 2024 suggest that broadcasters may reduce investment into local content by 60 to 80 million in the coming year. That's a lot of money. That's probably the alarm bell coming out of the screen production sector. But it doesn't understand that purely in the sense of audiences are tuning out. It starts to kind of think about why. So it talks about decreased engagement with local content. It's not just that there's more competition from international, it's just that it's much harder to find local stuff. So if you buy a TV right now and open it up and plug it in, it's what most people do, it won't have TVNZ Plus on it, it won't have 3 Now on it, it certainly won't have anything from Whakaata Māori on it, and you'll have to go out and proactively download those things, and then they'll probably be on another screen from the main screen you open up with. There certainly won't be a button on your remote where you can punch straight into it the same way that you can with Netflix or Disney Plus. They pay for those, by the way. So what this is called, this tends to come under the bundle or the name of must carry, which basically will say if you buy a TV, it should come with the local apps preloaded and they should be given prominence. That's really smart thinking from a distribution side. It will increase engagement. It quotes research saying that 1/3 of Australians didn't know how to download an app and half of them didn't know how to sort of rearrange their home screen. The home screen on smart TVs really matters. There is another piece of it connected to that is about the fact that TVNZ is obligated to invest in local content, and it's the whole differentiator. It's the whole reason that we own a media company and have local media regulations, is we want there to be stuff made here about here, whether that's news, entertainment, whatever. There is no such requirement on international streamers. The likes of Netflix and Amazon Prime have almost no New Zealand content on it, and none of it original. Where there's a show that's shot here, it's just using New Zealand as a location. It has almost no relevance to us beyond its bit of economic development. So they're going to consider ideas about minimum content obligations or investment obligations or levies. And they quote, the EU requires 30% European content in a streaming platform's catalogues. The Netherlands has an investment obligation of 5% of annual revenue. Italy's equivalent is 16%. This is what the production sector has been crying out for. For us to have transferred so much of our attention to platforms where there's no New Zealand content, we're kind of the 51st state of America in some respects because of that. And we will certainly continue, and from a cultural sense. So unless we change that, this is an important thing to be thinking about. Now, there's another thing which I think is really underrated in this discussion, which they note, which is that New Zealand's this is a quote from the document, New Zealand's obligations under trade agreements, international trade law to treat international content providers and creators no less favourably than domestic content providers and creators in respect to the production, distribution, marketing, sale and delivery of content. That is honestly kind of sitting behind a huge amount of this and needs to be more part of the discussion. I intend to do a fold episode drilling into exactly that sometime in the coming weeks. So I might reserve more comment on that. But that will potentially be a hard thing. But so long as we make all platforms subject to this, then we can impose whatever we like on the big international streamers, for example. There's the sort of next big piece is about increasing captioning and audio description. This is not as big of a deal in terms of the sort of scale of what it will do to the local sector, but it's hugely meaningful to people who rely on, audio descriptions or captioning, deaf, blind, but also, a whole bunch of people who, for other reasons, can't necessarily access content in the same way that other people can. That probably more impacts as a cost on local providers because the big internationals are typically better. They're further up on that. So we'll see how that falls financially. That might require some more funding for the likes of Able, but really good to see it in there. It's a huge part of the puzzle. And the final note is about modernising professional media regulation. It's interesting, this professional media regulation. Professional is the operative word there. They've done that because there was an internal affairs inquiry a couple of years ago that was trying to bundle all media, including social media, into media reform. I think there's no real reason why that shouldn't be the case. People kind of treat them interchangeably from I will use this thing to get culture and information. I'll be exposed to advertising on it. What's the difference between a YouTube, a TikTok, a TVNZ Plus, a Herald, really, when it comes down to it? But they have kind of left that alone, though the door's open a bit. I mean, people can submit on this. But in terms of what this document's about, it is explicitly, and I quote, not including online platforms that primarily host user-generated content and provide access to others' content, such as social media, like Facebook and TikTok, and search engines like Google. Not bringing other types of media, like social, into the regulatory regime and leaving the broader content classification regime, including the classification office, separate, may mean the proposal is less durable and future-proof. So they note that is actually a bit of a hole in it at this point. And then the final sort of pillar of it is to merge New Zealand and the Film Commission. That's something that I've written about as a sort of a looming idea. This is the first time it's been sort of officially flagged. Again, it makes sense. And they do note the fact that Screen Australia has been doing exactly that for a decade, that in Ireland, as I say, it happened in 2018. there will be complications. There'll be people who've got a real problem with it from either an artistic or economic development or a cultural level. It's just going to happen, and I think it sort of has to. So, look, that's my very first kind of response to this. It's a fantastic piece of work. It's overdue, but it's happening. It's joined up. If they can hold their nerve and bring along New Zealand First and act with them, now that's really crucial, and they will have different forms of objection to it. I've already seen that the Free Speech Union has fired off a volley saying how, unnecessary all this is. I'd say the Taxpayers Union and New Zealand Initiative might be the same. So there is a free market and sort of end of the spectrum, which typically can be quite aligned with ACT, who will be against it. But again, like, these reforms are broadly popular, certainly on the other side of the aisle, so you might be able to pass this by other means. In any case, I'll leave it there. Really interesting piece of work, overdue, well put together. We'll see how it survives, but I just have to commend Paul Goldsmith and the people at MCH who put this together, and the likes of Sparta who've been lobbying for it for some time. It makes mention of, but the likes of the Fair Digital News Bargaining Bill, I should note, but doesn't sort of use this as part of that package. We might see some serious media reforms at some point next year, which would be really, really good. So thanks for listening, and this was The Fold, and thank you Ti here for prompting me to do this. Appreciate it.
The Spin-off Podcast Network.